everyone. And today's topic is about Linux boot process. So the Linux boot process on the any x86 computer can be split into four major phases. The first phase is firmware phase, or the firmware is basically every computer's BIOS or the UEFI setup. The BIOS is the older firmware, and the UEFI is the advanced firmware, which presently all the computers has. So when you boot a computer, the first thing which you see is the either BIOS or UEFI display. The second phase is the bootloader phase, which we also call the GRUB. The GRUB is the utility which we use in the bootloader as a bootloader. The third is the kernel phase, and then the initialization. The firmware phase of the BIOS or UEFI. The firmware scans the available storage devices to locate a boot device and its master boot record. A master boot record is located on the first sector on the boot disk. The MBR or the master boot records holds the bootloader program, which is GRUB. So basically, the firmware or the BIOS or UEFI transfer the control to the bootloader program by looking into the master boot record. Once the control has been transferred to the GRUB, the RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, uses the GRUB2 Grand Unified Bootloader version 2 as the bootloader program. GRUB2 supports both BIOS and the UEFI firmware. The primary job of the bootloader program is to spot the Linux kernel code in the /boot file system, decompress it, and load into the memory. GRUB configuration defined in the /boot/grub2 and grub.cfg file. And for the UEFI BIOS systems, GRUB2 looks for the EFI system partition in /boot/EFI instead, and runs the kernel based on the configuration defined in /boot/small EFI/caps EFI/redhat/grub.efi file. The grub.cfg file is the main GRUB2 configuration file that supplies the boot time configuration information. This file located in the /boot/grub2 directory on the BIOS-based system, and in the /boot/EFI and then caps EFI/redhat directory on the UEFI based systems. So to change the values of grub.cfg file, we have to make changes in another file, which is located in /etc/default/grub file. This is the grub file through which we can make changes in these two files, and then replicate the changes to the grub.cfg file using utility grub2-mkconfig. This is the /etc/default.grub file. This file contains the different parameters and its value. We'll go and look into it, the details of the every parameter. The first parameter is the GRUB timeout. When you start the Red Hat Linux, the GRUB loads and it gives you a default time, which is the 5-second time to choose your kernel and options. Otherwise, it will start loading with the default kernel. So it's basically defines the wait time in seconds before booting of the kernel, and default is the 5. Then it comes to the GRUB distributor, set the name of the Kali distribution. Then GRUB default boot selected option from the previous system boot. GRUB disable submenu, enables disable the appearance of the GRUB submenu. The terminal output is the default terminal, usually console, and the CMD Linux and the specify command line option passes to the kernel at the boot time. GRUB display discovery. GRUB display recovery list hides systems recovery entries into the GRUB menu and enable BLSFCG. The defines whether to use the new bootloader specifically to manage configuration. So let's do an exercise, and in this exercise we will change some values of it and replicate it to the actual GRUB program. When we start the computer, the bootloader presents a menu with a list of the bootable kernels available on the system and waits for the predefined amount of the RAM, which is by default 5 seconds. Before the time out, the boots default to the default kernel. Let's do an exercise, and in this exercise we will change the GRUB default boot time from 5 seconds to 10 seconds, and for this we will edit first the etc default GRUB file, and then on BIOS based system, like in my VMware environment, it is a BIOS based system, we will make changes by using sudo grub2-mkconfig-o/boot/grub2/grub.cfg, or in any UEFI system, sudo grub2-mkconfig-o/boot/efi/caps-efi/redhat/grub.cfg. So let's do this exercise. Now I'm in my Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and the first thing which I'll do, I'll make the changes into the GRUB file. So let's first open the file, sudo vim/etc/default and the GRUB. So this is the file where we make changes and then replicate it into the actual configuration file in the boot partition. So let me edit this. I press A to go into the insert mode, and then we'll change this timeout from the 5 second to, let's say, 15 second. Okay, so it will be a visible change. Now press escape and then shift : X mark of exclamation, enter. This is saved and exit. So just to verify, if you would like to verify that the changes have been done, so just view the values, or you can use the cat program or NL program, NL as well. NL will give you display the file with the line numbers as well. So /etc/default and then GRUB. So we have made the changes to the line number 1, which is the GRUB timeout, to the 15. Okay, so clear the screen, and now we'll do the sudo and GRUB 2-mkconfig-o and /boot/grub2 and then grub.cfg. That's it on the BIOS based system. Hit enter. So it's basically generating the new grub.cfg file. You cannot manually edit this file. Okay, and this is done. Now what we have to do, we have to restart our system. So we'll go and restart. So the change which we have to observe is the time here. If you see at the last line, the selected entry will be started automatically now in 9 seconds. It is started from the 15 second and gradually reducing. While otherwise it was the 5 second by default. So we have changed this GRUB configuration by editing the GRUB file in the etc default and then make the changes replicated to the /boot/grub2/grub.cfg file.